Chapter 8, Section 8.2, use the quadratic equation. So I already introduced two methods. One was method of square root, and the second was method of completing the square. So to solve the second degree equation. So to solve the second degree equation, the first method was method of the square root, and then method of completing the square. And the third one that we're going to discuss here is using quadratic formula. These three methods all apply for second degree equations. Second degree equations, we also call it quadratic equation. Second degree equation because the highest power of x is 2. Second degree equations or quadratic equation. So for that, first I want to introduce quadratic equation before we actually go through the problems. Quadratic equation is this formula. Ax cubed plus bx plus c equal to 0. So we are applying the formula in order to solve it. Like this example, which is the very first problems. First, you have to identify what number is sitting next to, like in this case, the variable is x2. You have to find what number is sitting next to it, or the variable is m2. What number is sitting next to it when you don't see anything means is 1. What number is sitting to the second one, which is the power of 1? See, b here in this 3 and 2. Then I need to take all three numbers and plug into this formula. Remember, in this formula, this line goes all the way from here to there. So the whole thing is over 2a. So when you take those numbers and plug in, that's how you get two answers. Again, it's a second degree equation, so it should be at least two possible answers. You identify your A, B, and C, take those numbers and plug into that formula. See, in this case, the number of possible answers are 2, but remember in this one, there was just one answer. Why? Because under the radical, I have radical 0, and if you use your calculator, radical 0 is 0, so this part is gone. So all you have is just one answer. When you solve the quadratic equations, you might have 2 answers, 1 answers, or no answers. If under the radical, you see, under the radical, if this number happened to be negative, then it's undefined because we don't have radical negative number under the radical. Or if under the radical, the outcome is something positive like this one, you always have 2 answers. So look, you have 2 answers. Here you have just 1 answer because under the radical you have 0. And then you see a situation that under the radical you have negative number, which is no answer to that. Look at this one. This one, A, B, C. Like here, you see how B is the negative number? But in the formula, we have negative B. See, here in the formula, you have negative B. If B is negative, then negative times negative become positive. Like here, look, B is already negative. But the formula is negative B, which is negative, and this is B, negative is positive. So when you are using the quadratic formula, you got to be very careful about the signs, plus or minus. Make sure you don't make a mistake working on A, B, C, especially when you're dealing with the negative sign. This part, which is B to power of 2, is always positive. It doesn't matter whether you are positive or negative for B here, because the power of 2 is always positive. Here is minus 4 times A times C. See, A is 3, B is C, okay? And then you take numbers out. So that's how you came up with it. So the answer can be written in any of this. Like when you work on my MATLAB, depend how they want you to write the answer. But when you take the test, it doesn't matter. Any of this is always acceptable. But Again, it depends how they want you to write answers. You know, when you have a fractions, I think it's easy to get rid of this, because if you don't want to put a equal 1/3, it's kind of a little complicated to do that. So what I do here is I just multiply everything by 3 first. Look, I put a 3 here, 3 here, 3 here. So in that case, I don't have to deal with fractions. Like if this is 1/5, you multiply everything by 5. Okay. So now you have your A, B, and C. You put into the equations, and here I show you how to take 132 and break it like that. I also introduce another formula. The formula is not in the textbook, so it just make it easier sometimes if you understand it, especially if you have the formula in front of you. Sometimes it's easier to use this formula, because when you're dealing with this formula, then you don't have to do this part. You see how when you reach to this part, you have to divide everything by 2. If you use this formula, you may not end up this. You just come straight to that one. For instance, here, this is a special formula as long as B is even number. If B is not even, you cannot use it. See, B is the even number. Then you could use this formula. So for these problems, look, for this one, you know how B is even? Another way to do it is use this formula. So here, what is B prime? B prime is half of B. So like you see how you have -12? What is half of -12? Is -6. Again, this is this option. You don't have to, but I think if you understand how to use it, it makes it a lot easier for quadratic. Here, half of, so this formula works if B is even number. Since if B is -12 is even, then you take half of that, which is -6, and then you put everything in this formula. So you don't have 4 anymore, you don't have 2a, and you just have B prime. So you take this B prime, which is -6, and you use that here. Okay. So you come up with the same answer, but you don't, again, that would skip this part, because sometimes people do not understand that they have to simplify this. To use the quadratic, first you have to simplify. So first I have to multiply these two parentheses. I have to distribute 3. I got to bring everything to one side, simplify to end up this equations. And anytime you are solving the quadratic equations, you want to make sure that all the terms are on one side equal 0. Quadratic equation requires 0 on this side. So all 3 terms must be on one side. That's why I brought these 2 to the other side. See, equal to 0. Then I can use the formula. Then A is 5, B is 13, C is 8, and just take all the numbers and plug it. Now this one, remember I said if under the radical you have a negative number is undefined, like here. When you subtract 72 from 36, you get radical -16. Radical -16, when you use your calculator, give you error. So problem like this, because under the radical, b squared minus 4ac, if b squared minus 4ac is negative, there is no real solution, but there is a complex solution. So to see if there is an answer or not when you are using the quadratic, it all depends what you have under the radical. If b squared minus 4ac is a positive number, there are always 2 answers. If b squared minus 4ac is 0, then this is gone, it's just 1 answer. If b squared minus 4ac is a negative number, there is no real solutions. But there is a complex number. Remember, radical minus 16. Radical minus 16 if you remove this negative out, you have to put an I here. Anytime you have a negative under the radical and you want to move it out, you gotta put an I. See, when I move this out, then radical 16 is 4. So this should be 4. So it's minus 6, also minus 4i divided by 2. Okay, and then when you simplify it here, this should be 2i. Sorry. So it should be negative 3 plus or minus 2i. So first you have to multiply, you have to bring 3 to one side. Why? Because the quadratic equation, all the term must be on one side equal to 0 in order to solve. See, I'll put it here. So first you multiply these two. Then you bring the 3 to this side and simplify it in order to reach to this. A is 1, B is negative 2, C is 6. See? A is 1, B is negative 2, C is negative 6. You plug everything into the equation to have that. Same thing. You have to bring X and then bring everything to one side and then use the formula. Remember I said if under the radical, if it's greater than 0, there is always two answers. If it's 0, one answer. If it's less, no real solution. There is a complex, but no real solution. So here, look, x2 minus 2l. The formula is this. I don't see any x here. That means b is 0. When you don't see any x, means b is 0, right? It's like x2 plus 0x. And so you put everything here. Here, they don't ask you to solve it. They just want you to find radical b squared minus 4ac, because under the radical there is b squared minus 4ac, right? They just want you to find out to see if this is positive or not. Yes, b squared minus 4ac is 48, is a positive, so you always end up with two answers. Here in this one, first I'll bring everything to one side, and then b squared minus 4ac is positive. Yes, two answers. Same thing here. So this is different, this problem. You know, we have this formula in trig that if you have a 90-degree triangle, if you have a 90-degree triangle, you know, like this. If this side is A and this side is B and the longest side is C, we always have this formula exists among all three sides. The longest side, and there has to be a 90-degree triangle. They call it right triangle. In the 90-degree triangle, the longest side to power of 2 is sum of the perfect square of each leg. These problems, there is a square here. So half of that is the triangle here. Longest side is 86. Each side is A. So is A to power of 2, A to power of 2 is 86, and that would give you the value of A. Okay? So that's how you find it. So it just happened that these two, in this example, these two sides are equal because this is a square. So when you put this to power of 2, this to power of 2 is this, and 86 to power of 2 is that, divided by that, give you the value of A. And remember, when you're working a problem like this, because we are talking about the dimensions, A, B, and C, they all must be positive. And then they ask you to find the area of square, which is always A square.